3 days before Christmas in 2022, the city of Denver was covered in soft white snow. The streets looked shiny and peaceful, like a picture from a holiday card. Cars passed by slowly, and soft jazz versions of Christmas songs floated through the cold air. Everything outside looked warm and magical. But inside my life, everything was starting to fall apart because of one phone call. I had just come home to my small one-bedroom apartment near Capitol Hill. I was very tired after working a long double shift at the community clinic. My feet hurt, my fingers were still cold, and my breath made little white clouds in the air when I walked up the stairs. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The apartment was quiet. I kicked off my heavy boots and slowly took off my navy blue work scrubs. Then I noticed the small suitcase sitting near the door. It was already packed. On top of it was a soft pine green scarf. Next to the suitcase were a few carefully wrapped Christmas gifts. I had wrapped them neatly with bright paper and ribbon. Each gift had been chosen with care. I had remembered the nutmeg my family liked for their holiday drinks. I had searched through several stores to find the exact kind of toffee my aunt always talked about. I had spent time thinking about what everyone would like. I had tried very hard to do everything right this year. Maybe I thought this year would be different. Maybe this year I would finally feel like I truly belonged. Then my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen and saw the name Orion. My older brother. I answered the call with a small smile. "Hey, Jules." But his voice didn't sound warm like usual. It sounded slow and careful. "Hey, Maris," he said. "I just wanted to give you a quick heads up. Amara is coming to Christmas this year." I paused. Amara was his new girlfriend. She liked spiritual things like sound healing and energy balance. Once she had even burned sage in the living room because I said I worked in palliative care with very sick patients. Orion continued speaking. "She's really into emotional alignment," he said. "And the energy you bring from working at the clinic, it can be kind of heavy for her." I stayed quiet. "So we thought," he continued gently, "maybe this year you could take a break from coming over for Christmas." Then he added quickly, "You understand, right? It's nothing personal." I stood there, holding the phone. The small Christmas tree in my apartment blinked with colorful lights. But suddenly those lights did not feel cheerful anymore. Nothing personal. Before I could even answer him, another call came in. It was my mother. I picked it up. Her voice sounded sweet, but there was something hard underneath it. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "we just want everyone to have peace this Christmas." She paused for a moment. "You know how sensitive Amara is." My chest felt tight. Then she said the words that hurt the most. "If you come, it might make things uncomfortable. Honestly, if you show up, we might not open the door." There were no soft excuses. No long explanations. Just a simple message. I wasn't welcome. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. And I didn't beg them to let me come. I just stood there quietly with the phone still in my hand. My eyes slowly moved to the small gifts I had wrapped with so much hope. Gifts for people who had never really made space for me in their lives. People who only seemed to notice me when something needed fixing. This year, I let the silence answer for me. I moved slowly around the room, like someone cleaning up after a quiet goodbye. Then I opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account. First, I canceled the automatic payment that helped my parents pay their overdue property tax. Next, I locked the monthly money transfer I had been sending to support Orion's startup idea. Then I ended the car insurance plan I had co-signed for my dad the year before. I didn't feel angry. I just felt finished. For many years, I believed something simple. I believed that if I gave enough, if I helped enough, if I kept showing up with kindness, calmness, and homemade food, then maybe I would finally earn a place at the family table. Not just a chair, but a place where I truly belonged. I believed that being dependable would make me important to them. But that quiet night in my apartment, with the warm smell of cinnamon in the air and the gentle humming of the old heater, the truth slowly became clear. I had never celebrated. I had only been allowed to stay until someone decided I shouldn't. Outside the window, soft snowflakes began falling from the sky. They covered the city in quiet white. I stood there watching the snow. And suddenly I felt something unexpected. Relief. No more trying so hard to fit in. No more shrinking myself to make others comfortable. No more asking if I was welcome. This Christmas, I would not be the girl standing outside, looking through the window at everyone else's happiness. I would not be the person who was almost enough. My family always remembered me when something needed fixing. For a long time, I thought that was normal. Some children receive attention and praise. Others are expected to be steady and helpful, like furniture that quietly stays in the room. Always there, but rarely noticed. I was the oldest child. My dad sometimes joked at family cookouts that I was the practiced child. The one parents learn from. The one who has to earn love by being useful. Orion was 5 years younger than me. He was the charming one. The dreamer. The one everyone smiled at. When he skipped paying rent because he was trying to record his band's third album, my parents called it passion. But when I worked extra shifts at the hospital, they told me I was overworking myself. When Orion was 15, he spray-painted colorful shapes all over the garage wall. My parents laughed and called it creative expression. But 2 days later, when I accidentally dropped a casserole dish, I received a long lecture about being careless. One time in high school, I filled out a FAFSA form for college financial aid. I left it on the kitchen counter for my mom to sign. I even highlighted the exact place where she needed to write her name. She never asked about it. She never mentioned it again. When I received my medical school acceptance letter, I brought it home proudly. I thought maybe this time they would celebrate. My mom looked at the letter quickly. "That sounds intense," she said. "Just don't lose yourself in it." Then she turned back to chopping celery like nothing special had happened. But when Orion dropped out of school for the 3rd time to start a healing podcast, my parents threw him a welcome home dinner. There were candles on the table. There was cake. There were balloons. There was even a framed photo of Orion holding a paintbrush hanging proudly in the hallway. The same house that never celebrated any of my graduations was full of excitement for a son who had never held a steady job. One day I found one of my old sketchbooks at their house. Inside were small drawings I had made during quick breaks at the hospital. Little pictures of Denver sunsets. Sketches of patients' hands holding mine while they recovered. The sketchbook was in the recycling bin. It was sitting under old takeout menus and expired coupons. When I asked about it, my parents laughed and shrugged. "We thought it was scrap paper," they said. Maybe it was a scrap to them. Maybe I was too. Still, I kept showing up. Through medical school. Through my long residency training. Through the quiet night shifts in hospital rooms where many doctors didn't like to stay. Rooms filled with old photographs, quiet regrets, and the sadness of people who felt forgotten. That was why I chose to work in geriatrics. I understood those quiet places. I understood what it felt like to give your whole life to others and then be noticed only when something went wrong. At home, my role never changed. I was the calm one, the helper, the invisible person who kept everything from falling apart. When a heavy snowstorm damaged my parents' roof and the insurance company refused to pay, I quietly paid for the repairs. When Orion's freelance work stopped again, I sent him money without asking questions. When my mom's hip pain got worse and her physical therapist stopped coming because the bills weren't paid, I made the phone calls, scheduled the appointments, and paid the fees. I told myself I did these things because I loved them. But maybe there was another reason. Maybe I believed love was something you had to earn. My family never said thank you. Maybe they didn't feel they needed to. In their world, love was not something people spoke about. It was just expected. Like sunshine in the morning. Every time I gave another piece of my life to help them, they accepted it easily. Not because they wanted to hurt me, but because they never stopped to think about what it cost me. For many years, I thought this was simply what family meant. Being unseen but necessary. Like the metal frame inside a building. Strong and important, but hidden behind the walls. But that night, after the phone calls telling me not to come home for Christmas, something inside me finally broke. I realized something important. The frame holding a building together should not have to bleed for the building it supports. I was tired of shrinking my life so theirs could stay comfortable. One time Orion suddenly bought a set of expensive vintage camera lenses for a documentary project. After buying them, he realized he couldn't afford his flight home for Thanksgiving. So I bought the plane ticket for him. At the airport he hugged me tightly. "You're the best sister in the universe," he said. But a week later it was forgotten. Just another favor added to the long list of things I had done. No one had to ask me for help. I was always one step ahead, like a quiet ghost working behind the scenes of their lives. Fixing problems, paying bills, smoothing things out. Always there, but rarely seen. They never said thank you. Maybe because saying thank you would mean admitting how much they depended on me. Sometimes after a long 12-hour shift at the hospital, I would sit by my window with a cup of warm peppermint tea. I would look out at the quiet city lights and wonder what it might feel like to truly be seen. Not for the problems I could solve. Not for the money I could send. Not for the things I could repair. Just seen for who I was. Not a backup plan. Not a support beam. Just Maris. But those thoughts felt like dreams. And dreams were for people like Orion with big ideas and sketchbooks. Not for girls worrying about tax forms and heating bills. So I kept going. Every Christmas, I brought the bread pudding my family loved. When they tasted it, they smiled and asked, "Who made this again?" Like it had simply appeared on the table by magic. When Orion's rent was short, I sent money quietly. When my parents were confused about their tax forms, I stayed on the phone late at night, helping them fill every line. Meanwhile, my own tax papers sat unopened beside my refrigerator. I always told myself the same thing. Love means showing up. Love means being steady. Love means fixing everything. That one day, I thought that if I did enough for my family, maybe someone would finally notice me. Maybe, just maybe, they would turn around and see me. But standing there in my tiny kitchen, the phone still warm from a call that had told me I couldn't come to Christmas because I was too much, I knew better. They wouldn't notice me, not because they didn't care, but because I had never asked them to. I had trained them not to. For years, I had swallowed my own needs, my own wishes, my own life, so they wouldn't have to see me as anything more than someone who quietly fixed problems and disappeared when I was done. That night, the smell of cinnamon hung in the air. The snow outside fell softly, coating the world in a quiet white blanket that felt like forgiveness, like a soft eraser smoothing over the harsh lines of the day. I picked up my phone, but I didn't call anyone. I didn't ask for anything. Instead, I opened my banking app. My fingers hovered for a moment, trembling slightly, before I pressed cancel. The $8,000 I had been sending every month to keep their mortgage and bills paid. My own money, my own work, my own life was gone. My emergency savings were safe. No more surprise repairs. No more middle-of-the-night rescues. Orion's dead car battery in the middle of a freezing winter? That would be his problem. At first, it felt strange. Almost robotic. Just a few taps. Cancel auto transfer. End payment authorization. Freeze joint access. Like brushing my teeth, like paying my rent, like following a routine that was so familiar it didn't feel real. But as I completed each step, something grew inside me. A calm, quiet feeling, soft at first, like the first breath after a long run. It wasn't anger. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't numbness. It felt like freedom, like a bird stretching its wings for the first time, unsure but happy. Tentative but ready to fly. I opened my notebook and started to write. Not to scold myself or to feel guilty, but to see. To see all the quiet debts I had swallowed without ever telling a soul. The flights I had paid for. The surprise surgeries I had covered. The bounced checks I had rescued. The broken-down cars I had fixed. The dozens of emergencies I had patched together behind the scenes, quietly, without a word of thanks or a nod of recognition. My pen scratched across the page, and the ink blurred. Not because of tears, but because of the weight of finally seeing my own exhaustion reflected back at me. I wasn't angry. Not at them, not at myself. No matter how they might tell the story later. Maris is too cold. Maris is always intense. I wasn't angry. I was just awake. The thing about being invisible for so long is that people only notice when you're gone. The missed mortgage payment wouldn't matter until the final notice arrived. The emergency maintenance fund wouldn't be a problem until the pipes burst in January. Orion's gigs would still rise and fall like waves on the ocean. But this time, there would be no net beneath him. No quiet sister secretly stitching everything together with love and bank wires. No one to make his life easier while remaining unseen. I didn't make a dramatic announcement. No sudden exit. No cryptic social media posts. I didn't even tell Aunt Violetta, the only person who still sent birthday cards by hand. I simply unplugged the half-written Christmas message I had been drafting. Deleted it. Unplugged the little tree I had set up in the corner. The lights, the ornaments, the little presents I had wrapped carefully and thoughtfully. They all seemed suddenly ridiculous in the face of my decision. I didn't cry. There was no room for sadness. Only clarity. Love shouldn't feel like a job. Families shouldn't feel like a subscription with a hidden fee. I had spent decades trying to earn something that should have been freely given. But silence is not love, and usefulness is not belonging. Across town, in a house filled with lights, laughter, and noise, they celebrated. And for the first time, I let them. I let them enjoy their Christmas on the illusion they had created, the story they had built in which I was the problem, the heavy one, the complicated one, the one who never quite fit the sparkle of their curated holidays. For the first time, I didn't show up. And in not showing up, I reclaimed something I hadn't even known I had lost. Something quiet, small, and precious, my own life. Christmas morning arrived soft and gray. The Denver skyline was hidden in a thick fog. Snow clung to the rooftops like forgotten frosting. The silence outside matched the silence within my apartment. I sat by the window, wrapped in my favorite blanket, the one that smelled faintly of rosemary and comfort. A warm mug of cinnamon apple tea cradled in my hands, steam rising like memory, filled the space around me. I didn't light the tree. I didn't play the carefully curated holiday playlist. I didn't call or text anyone. I simply sat in stillness, calm and whole. The presents I had wrapped with care sat in the corner. Colorful, cheerful, and a little naive. They looked foreign, like they belonged to someone who still believed that effort guaranteed belonging. But there was no grief that morning. No ache, no tears. Just stillness. Sacred, cleansing stillness, like the breath after a long scream, like the clean air after a storm. I hadn't realized how much noise I had been carrying until it vanished. Time moved differently that day. Noon passed like a whisper. There were no calls. No background clatter from my parents' kitchen. No selfies from Orion or Amara with hashtags about joy. No Venmo requests for surprise holiday expenses. Only silence. I felt no urge to interrupt it. Evening came, the sky turning a bruised purple. My phone buzzed once, then again, then a third time. At first, I ignored it. Probably a work group chat I had forgotten to mute. But then a message lit the screen. "Violetta, can you answer? You've done enough damage already." I froze. Damage? I hadn't even been there. My phone rang. Her name flashed again. I picked up, my voice rough from disuse. "What happened?" Her tone was gentle, careful, like she was approaching something fragile. "They're saying you ruined Christmas," she said quietly. "But Maris, you weren't even there." The words hit like ice. I blinked. "How do you ruin something you weren't invited to?" She hesitated, then explained in pieces. After dinner, Amara, wine glass in hand, had paused to look at family photos on the mantel. One photo, faded and slightly crooked, caught her eye, a birthday party from years ago. I must have been 11 or 12, caught mid-laugh, wearing a maroon sweater 2 sizes too big. One sleeve nearly swallowed my hand. Amara tilted her head, squinting, and said clearly enough for the room to hear. "That's Dr. Maris Morgan, isn't it?" Aunt Violetta nodded slowly. "She's the one who stayed with our neighbor all night. Saved her life." The air shifted. Laughter cut off like someone flipped a switch. Forks hovered midair. Glasses stopped clinking. Orion went pale. My mother's smile froze. Amara looked from face to face and asked, "Wait, Maris is your sister, the one you talk about?" No one answered. Whatever half-truth or evasive comment came next was enough. Amara gathered her things, thanked everyone politely but sharply, and walked out. By the time Aunt Violetta called me, the ripple had already begun. Amara had posted something online. Nothing explosive, just honest. A few sharp lines about how families rewrite people to fit prettier stories, about how silence can erase someone, about the damage done in rooms lined with smiling photos of people you pretend don't exist. I didn't need the exact wording. I could picture it clearly. The crash of the curated image. The family friends reading between the lines. The small art circles in New York gossiping quietly. The quiet unraveling of a brand built on charm and exclusivity. And for the first time, someone outside the family noticed me, not as a burden, but as a human being, a doctor, a sister, a presence. That night, sitting alone in the stillness of my apartment, I learned something more powerful than any comeback. Sometimes the sharpest truth is the silence you leave behind. The day after Christmas, it began. Desperation leaked through polished cracks. An email titled, "Let's Reset Things." It read like a corporate memo. Bland, polished, full of nothing. Signed jointly by my mother, my father, and Orion. No real apology, just talk about heightened emotions, holiday stress, and valuing family. Buried halfway down, I found the real request. Could I reach out to Amara? Clarify things? Smooth it over? Not because they missed me. Not because they finally understood me. But because Orion's art career might be hurt. It wasn't about me. It had never been about me. Just the mess my absence had left behind. A mirror they could no longer avoid. I didn't reply. That night, snow whispered against my windows and my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't family. It was the hospital administrator, Lucian Crow. A man I had only met once at a charity gala. Kind eyes. Firm handshake. He sounded hesitant. "Maris," he began. "This is a little awkward, but I got a call from your father. He's worried about your emotional well-being. Maybe you've been under stress lately and might need some time off." My blood turned to ice. Not the kind that numbs, but the kind that hardens, sharp and weaponized. My father, the man who once laughed that I was too intense for my own good, was now using that very trait to paint me as unstable. Not because he believed it, but because he thought it would control me, shake me, scare me into silence. It didn't work. Lucien saw through it, but the message was clear. They weren't seeking reconciliation. They were seeking leverage. And that failed. The next move came like a quiet storm. A curated smear campaign through group texts, whispers to cousins and distant aunts. Maris is just going through a tough time. She's isolating herself. She's overwhelmed. No mention of Christmas. No mention of exclusion. Just concerned words, twisted into control. A cousin I hadn't spoken to since Orion's first art show messaged me out of nowhere. "Hey love, if you ever need a yoga retreat, I've got a discount code." Each polished manipulation, every betrayal wrapped in performative care, only sharpened my clarity. They weren't protecting me. They were protecting their story. The one where Orion was the gifted, brilliant, central star of the family, and I was the quiet helper who never made waves. But I was done smoothing their story. The snow outside kept falling, slowly erasing the footprints of every path I had taken to make myself smaller for them. And for the first time, I felt no urge to correct the record. No need to defend myself or explain the truth. But it didn't end there. Not with people who believed they were entitled to your silence. It came next, wrapped in softness, my mother's voice outside my door. It was a quiet Sunday evening. The cold outside pressed hard against the windows, like it was trying to get inside. The kind of cold that makes your nose tingle and your fingers stiff if they touch the metal of the window. I was sitting at my desk, writing notes about my patients at the hospital. My mug of tea sat beside me. I had poured it earlier, but it had gone cold while I worked. Steam didn't rise from it anymore, and it smelled faintly of herbs, but I didn't mind. I was used to being alone with my thoughts. Then I heard it, a soft knock at the door. Just a gentle tap, not loud enough to startle me, but loud enough to make me stop breathing for a moment. I didn't move. I just listened to my own heartbeat, thumping steady and calm in my chest. I didn't feel afraid. It was something else, something deep, a quiet waiting. I got up slowly and walked toward the door. My feet made soft taps on the floor. I peeked through the peephole. And there they were. My mom, my dad, and Orion. They were bundled in heavy coats. Their faces carried smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. They looked tired and forced. It was a picture-perfect apology framed in desperation, but I didn't open the door. I didn't feel fear, just a kind of sad emptiness that pressed into my chest. Like the feeling you get when you've waited a long time for something you hoped for, only to realize it might never come. I opened the door just a tiny bit, barely enough to let the cold air slip through. The cold stung my skin, making it red and tingly, but I didn't mind. I wasn't inviting them in, not yet. My mom spoke first, her voice soft, careful, practiced. "We just want to talk," she said. She gripped her purse like it held all the right words. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't soften, because I finally saw clearly. They weren't here for me. They were here for the old version of me. The little girl who believed love could be earned. The little girl who shrank herself smaller and smaller to fit into the tiny spaces they allowed. That girl didn't live here anymore. Silence filled the space between us. It was heavy and brittle. I could see my father's jaw twitch, like a small spark of frustration had appeared in his eyes. Orion shifted from one foot to the other, like he wanted to float off the porch entirely. They were uncomfortable, and I didn't care. After a moment, I gave them the only word that mattered. No. No speeches. No apologies. No bridges built out of the broken pieces of myself. Just no. My mom's face cracked. Confusion, disbelief, shock. She couldn't believe that I, the daughter she had relied on to always be small and quiet, had finally chosen for myself. I closed the door quietly, not slamming it, not making a show. Just a door. Just a boundary. I loved it. Outside, I could hear their voices rise and fall. First pleading, soft and hesitant, then sharper, tinged with frustration. They were not used to being denied. But I didn't listen. I went back to my desk, sat down, and wrapped my hands around my mug of cold tea. The silence around me felt sacred, almost comforting. On the shelf beside me was a framed letter from Amara. The ink was slightly smudged in places, but I could see that she had written every word carefully. I looked at it and felt weightless for the first time in years. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to mold myself into the daughter they wanted. I had carried their guilt, their silence, their neglect, and turned it into fuel to keep showing up. But I realized I wasn't born to reflect their pride. I wasn't born to carry their disappointment. There was something else inside me. Something strong. And maybe finally, that was enough. They didn't leave right away. I could hear shoes shuffling, voices murmuring with desperation curling at the edges. Then there was another soft knock. "Maris, please. We just want to talk." I stayed seated. The framed letter from Amara held me steady. My tea was cold, bitter, and strangely satisfying. I let the knocking continue until it softened, and then stopped. Then silence settled again. Not empty this time, but full, like it had room for something important. For the first time, I understood something important. Forgiveness doesn't always mean opening the door. Sometimes it means choosing not to. Sometimes it means standing tall while the people who broke you work themselves against the wall you built. But this wall wasn't made of anger or bitterness. It was made of self-worth. I didn't have to explain anything. I didn't have to beg to be seen. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Then I heard the shuffle of retreating footsteps. Car doors closed. The hum of an engine started and faded away. They were gone. I didn't flinch. I didn't reach for my phone. I felt no pull to chase after them. No aching desire to fix what they had broken with their silence. Only peace. Real peace. The kind that sinks deep into your chest when you finally stop begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for you. I turned away from the window. My apartment felt warmer now, not brighter, not louder, just mine. The Christmas tree still stood in the corner. Its lights were unplugged. The ornaments stayed on the branches. But somehow, it didn't look sad anymore. The gifts underneath still sat wrapped, but they weren't symbols of rejection. They were reminders that I had tried. I loved it. I had given the best parts of myself with open hands, and even if they didn't see it, I had done it. I made another cup of tea, stronger this time. Steam rose around my face as I pulled the blanket tighter across my shoulders. I returned to my desk. The letter from Amara caught the afternoon sunlight. She had written, "You made a difference. You didn't give up. You made me feel like I mattered." I touched the frame. It was wooden, solid, and smooth. Real and unshakable. Even if my family couldn't see my worth, someone else could. Someone honest, someone watching. I thought about all the years I had spent folding myself smaller to fit into their expectations. And I finally realized I was never meant to shrink. Not for them. Not for anyone. Closing the door hadn't been an act of cruelty. It was clear. They hadn't come because they loved me. They came because they wanted control. But that version of me, the quiet, dependable girl, she no longer existed. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew something important. Love doesn't require your silence. It doesn't demand your sacrifice. And it never, ever asks you to break yourself to make someone else whole. I sat back, sipped my tea, and watched the snow fall outside. Soft, silent, cleansing snow. And I realized this time, I had saved myself. Maybe for the first time in my life, I was free. The days passed slowly and gently, like deep breaths after a storm. The silence no longer felt lonely. It felt like space, a space I had never been allowed to claim before. I went back to work at the hospital. I made rounds. I visited patients whose families brought flowers and cards, and I visited patients whose rooms were quiet, empty except for the hum of machines. I stayed with them. I listened. I did the work that mattered. The work that doesn't make social media posts or glossy albums, but the work that keeps lives together. Then one afternoon, a small package arrived at my door. There was no return address, just my name handwritten neatly in slanted letters. I opened it carefully. Inside was thick ivory paper. The edges of the ink were slightly smudged, but it was from Amara. She wrote about her grandmother, how she still practiced yoga twice a week, how she walked to the farmer's market every Saturday. She remembered the days when the world had started to give up on her, and how there had been one doctor who hadn't. One doctor who stayed past visiting hours. One doctor who treated her like a person, not just a patient. I had reminded her she was still living. I read the letter 3 times, tracing each word with my fingers. That night, I framed it and hung it above my desk where the morning sun could touch it. A quiet, permanent reminder. I was never invisible. I was never too much. I was never a burden. I was exactly who I needed to be all along. And their inability to see that was never mine to carry. Weeks later, another email arrived. This one was less polished, more desperate. "We miss you. We never meant to hurt you. Can we start over?" Buried near the end, almost like a secret, was the real reason. "Please ask Amara to take down her post. Ethan is having trouble finding work now. It's affecting his future." Not an apology. No regret. Just another request for me to fix their problems and keep the peace. I didn't respond. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way. Not out of hate, but out of self-respect. That evening, as sunlight stretched across the letter from Amara, I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and felt whole. Not because anyone told me I mattered, but because I had stopped asking for permission to believe it myself. I was free. I was safe. I was exactly who I needed to be. And for the first time, the silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt full, peaceful, and completely mine.